Okay, this video is called Why Energy and Purpose Are Study Skills. I have a whole bunch of other videos on study skills, a lot of stuff from my earlier book, Straight A's at Stanford and on to Harvard. But if you search around how to raise IQ, study skills, probably the best one for new students would be, the one-page checklist of how to become a better student on study skills. But there's some additional little points I'm going to make here. So, study skills is going to be all the things in my other videos I talked about: memory techniques, letter number alphabet, word associations, pre-reading, condensed notes, all of this stuff, Lightner boxes, spaced interval repetition systems, the benefit of conversations. Like, I always like to talk on the phone with a friend when I learn something new, because that conversation sort of locks it into my brain's filing system. I got that idea from Colonel John Boyd. It's very helpful. You nowadays, often I learn something interesting, I'll just make a video about it. There's a real interesting guy on the internet. His name is Elliot Nicholson. This guy's a genius. I don't know where he's from. I think he's from England or something. I think he's an orthopedic surgeon or something like that. But he's also a math genius. And he would, whenever he learned something, he would make a video about it. And so then he's got all these accumulated videos on his YouTube channel. So that's one thing you do too. And that's kind of like what I do nowadays. If I learn something real interesting, I just make a video about it. In the past, I would make sure I had that in my notes somewhere, my condensed notes or my text summary of whatever the topic was. It's a little bit like the Feynman method, where you write everything you know about a subject into a Word file, text file, and you just have it available. In the old days, when I was studying mostly from textbooks, I used to just write the notes in the margins of the textbook. Another trick I used to find helpful was to make an audio CD recording of whatever I studied and, burn a CD, and then I'd play that in the car when I was commuting. You could just put the same thing onto a voice recorder or onto your cell phone or whatever works for you. It's good to have a quiet study area. You can wear ear protectors, because you don't want to you want to avoid losing intellectual bandwidth without your ears. You can't turn your ears off, so you want it quiet or you want ear protectors. You can study more. I mean, if you're doing the same amount of work as somebody else, the same methods, but you study more because you study during Christmas vacation, Easter vacation, and summertime, you'll know the subject better than the other people. And by the way, not to brag, but I was great at school. In my radiology residency, where only the top 20% of people could get into it, I was done with a 4.5-hour test in about an hour and 10 minutes with a perfect score. I got 99s on my med school boards as well. So I'm just saying is I know study skills. Okay, I've been interested in study skills. I've written like 4 books on study skills, so I have a lot of experience with this stuff. Time management. I can also tell you, when I talk to students, the better the student, the more excited they get when I talk, okay? Students that are having a hard time and don't really understand study skills, they look at me like I'm being weird. Why are you saying that? Most people don't do that. I'm like, no, you don't understand. These are the best possible study skills you could have. This is what it takes to be A++ at places like Stanford and Harvard, okay? All right, so next thing, time management. Yeah, time management's real valuable. Make a calendar and go through all that stuff and make a 30-minute increment list on your entire day and don't waste any time. No TV, no bullshit, no wasted time. Okay, make sure you get your sleep. Vitamin S for sleep. It makes you smarter, improves your memory. Have a healthy diet. Avoid caffeine, anything with a stimulant effect. Okay, purpose and love. Now, here's where I'm getting into stuff that hardly anybody knows or talks about. Purpose and love. Basically, the brain is programmed to remember what you care about. And it's programmed to remember anything important for your survival or for your reproduction. But if you care about something that's especially important to you, that might be important to your status, to achieve in your field of interest, whatever it is, your brain will care about it more. And the reason I say this is a lot of students I've seen, they just want to get a good grade on the test. And everybody wants to get a good grade on their test. That's nice. But when you have something bigger beyond yourself, a reason to pull yourself into a subject, you get better at it. So whenever you read, you should read for a reason. Like when I read, I'm reading either to learn something about nutrition and health, or I'm reading because I enjoy, a book. I want to read the great novels of all time. So I'll read Dostoevsky, Charles Dickens, and the other great writers, Henry Sienkiewicz, and all that other stuff. Okay, that makes you remember stuff better. Because when I was a kid, I admired my dad. He read a lot and he would talk a lot about the books. But what I later realized when I got older and I would want to discuss a subject with him and my uncle, because I had done focused reading, like let's say we're going to talk about the Vietnam War, I would have read 10, 15 books on the Vietnam War. I'd be ready to argue with them and I'd kick the crap out of them because they sort of read in a more random way. They weren't like gearing up for a debate, whereas I was. Anyways, what else? I sort of had come back home from college and wanted to be able to argue with my dad and my uncles And what I found when I got back, I was so dialed up from the competitive academic environments I had been in that they really weren't in the ballpark. Let's see, what else? Like for biochemistry, I would just tell myself, and it was true, biochemistry is the language of God that he uses to write the book of life. Someday I want to be a great doctor, so I must learn this, great doctor or scientist. And so I was just super energized and charged up to learn biochemistry. And I was great at it. I was like the best biochemistry student in the whole United States for medical students. And that's what got me pumped up. Okay, I would sit right in the front row, I'd like in competition with the teacher, see if he could get anything past me, and being all that emotionally hyped up. And you want to be emotional. Emotion improves memory. Your memory gets a lot better. And I wasn't just studying to get a good grade in the class. I was studying because I wanted to someday become a great doctor or scientist. I also knew that, you've got a midterm, you got a final exam in the regular class, but you've also got the boards exam, in another, year and a half from then, for example. So you want to have that information stored for long term. And if you study with this type of attitude, I always felt like it was close in academic competition. I was only like 10th percentile my first midterm exam in med school. But by the time I got to my second year, I used to be in the highest grade in the class on, most things. Out of 333 students. What else? And also talk to yourself. Say, I am lucky to have an opportunity to get to study this. These pictures up here are from the novel The Sorrows of Young Werther by Johann von Wolfgang Goethe. And this is Werther and this is Charlotte. And he was in love with Charlotte. And he would write letters to his friend Wilhelm. There were no cell phones in those days to call his friend. So he'd write letters to his friend about how he loved Charlotte, the way she, interacted with her siblings, the way she walked, the way she talked, the way she dressed. And what I'm saying is, if a student falls in love with biology or whatever other subject it is they're studying, the way Werther loved Charlotte, you'll get really good at it. So try to get yourself psyched up for that. So all of this psychological stuff and this emotional stuff makes you a much better student. And you want to be emotional. Emotion is good. All right, religion is good. I made a promise to my mother, to God, that I was going to try to be the best doctor or scientist I could be. That's good. Okay, the great achievers, they usually are kind of hyper emotional and have all these, personal components to it that makes them better. Okay, now here's a guy who was my wrestling coach in college. This is Mark Schultz. He was like a superhero. He was 3-time NCAA champion, world champion, Olympic champion. And I learned a lot of really good things from him. One of them was that he had a low VO2 max for energy. So if he tried to go full out in a wrestling match from start to finish, a lot of times that would not be in his interest. He might not do so well. So what he learned to do was he found that if he would not speak to anybody for about a week before a big wrestling tournament, he would wear sunglasses so people couldn't see his eyes, and he would just avoid everyone and be real quiet. And I know it sounds a little bit strange, but he said he was storing up energy. And then when he would go out and wrestle, it was like unbelievable. I mean, the guy was the best guy in the world. He was so unbelievable. His energy, you couldn't believe it. It was Superman. I mean, let me put it this way. We had a bunch of guys in our wrestling room that were all Americans at 190 pounds and heavyweight level that were bigger than him. And Mark Schultz would just beat the crap out of them like they were little high school kids. So what I'm trying to say is I saw how he could generate that type of energy. And I also learned myself that you want to simplify your life, minimize distractions. All of those things make you a significantly better student. A typical example was when I was in my second year, I would tutor the first year medical students, and they asked me to give a lecture on some topic that was only like about a week before my own final exams. And I should have refused to do it, but I agreed. And all of a sudden, I'm putting a lot of time into preparing this lecture for the junior students, and it distracted me from studying for my finals. I mean, I still did well, but I think I ended up like being third in the class instead of first in the class in some subject that I expected to crush, something like that. And so what I'm saying is, don't let yourself be distracted. Be selfish, the last month before your final exam. The other thing too is being lonely. Now, nobody wants to be lonely, and I didn't choose to have a lonely life on purpose. It sort of happened. High school was tons of fun, as happy as a person could be. But I often found myself lonely when I was far away from home at Stanford for college, or during medical school where I was at a big school and I didn't know anybody, and I didn't like it. But I think being lonely can be beneficial, just because I've known some guys that had their girlfriend living with them when they were trying to study for exams, and they felt like they had to put a lot of time into entertaining her. And, it's great having a girlfriend, a wife, and all that stuff. But when you have a big exam coming up, you need to be selfish and spend time by yourself and just get your sleep and avoid distractions. And it makes you a better student. I've also had times in my life where somebody would be messing with me for whatever it was. And I would have some long-term conflict with them, whatever it might be. And what I learned from experience is, man, if you just retire into yourself, you gain like this physical, intellectual energy. And it was the same thing like what Ramon Cajal had said when he was doing all his neurology research and drawing all the neurons. If you just focus all your energy on one thing, you get better at it a lot faster. So this intensity, Mark Schultz is like the most intense guy in the whole United States in the field of wrestling. Everybody was like scared of him because he could get up this energy level so powerful that, like I said, it made him like Superman. I'm telling you, he was throwing around all Americans like they were little children, like beaten. I mean, he was so much more powerful than them. It was unbelievable. So, while nobody wants to be lonely, it's not fun. You can sometimes draw strength from it. I've seen it. I've done it. I've had plenty of times where before a test, I'd say, okay, fine, I'm going to be lonely. I'm sad. I'm missing out on these social events, but I got this energy. It was the same thing, too, the last couple of years where there was, nobody knew what the heck was going to happen. And, with the prolonged infection stuff. So that was a year, for example, I said, okay, I got like 6 books in my head I want to write. So I'm just going to put all my energy into doing that. I had no cell phone. I refused to answer an email. I wouldn't even check my email for weeks or months on end. Okay, and what I found was, man, I could get a lot of work done. Just go to bed early and wake up early, and I would crank. And I got all 6 books done in 1 year. And so what I'm trying to say is, and they were, most of them, some of them were little books, but some of them were pretty big books too. One was a whole biochemistry book I wrote, How to Reduce the Risk of Chronic Disease, for example. So anyways, I'm just saying is, if you get your psychological game optimized, you will be quite impressed by how much you can build up your academic energy, your ability to do well in school or to master any subject you want to do or to finish writing a book or whatever it is you want to do. So anyways, that was the purpose of talking about this, the idea of generating energy, how to build intellectual energy, and how to use your purpose and love to make yourself better at something. So anyways, hope that was helpful.